It was a quiet evening in December when the phone rang at the small hospital room in rural Ohio. The veteran, John Harper, lay in bed, his body frail but his spirit still strong. He had fought in wars that many only read about in history books. Now, as he neared the end of his life, he thought his battles were over, but little did he know. One final call would change everything. The nurse picked up the phone, her eyes widening as she looked at the caller ID. She turned to John with a smile so bright it seemed to light up the dimly lit room. "Mr. Harper," she said softly, "it's President Trump on the line." John blinked, unsure if he'd heard her right. "President Trump," he whispered, his voice hoarse from years of smoking and the weight of countless memories. She nodded, handing him the phone gently. "He wants to speak with you." John took the phone hesitantly, his hands trembling slightly. For a moment there was silence as he tried to gather his thoughts. Finally he spoke. "Hello?" On the other end of the line came a familiar voice, warm and reassuring. "John Harper, this is Donald J. Trump." For a second, John didn't know what to say. All those years of service, all the sacrifices he made, it felt surreal that the president himself was calling him. "Sir," John finally managed, "I can't believe this is happening." The president laughed lightly, a sound that carried through the line like an old friend dropping by unannounced. "Well, John, I wanted to take a moment to thank you. You've served our country honorably, and I just wanted to let you know how much your sacrifice means to me and to millions of Americans." Tears welled up in John's eyes before he could stop them. No one had ever called him just to say thank you, not like this, not from someone so powerful. But then something unexpected happened. The president paused for a moment, his tone shifting ever so slightly. "John, I hear you're not doing too well these days," he said quietly. "Is that true?" John swallowed hard, nodding even though the president couldn't see him. "Yes, sir," he admitted. "The doctors say I don't have much time left." There was another pause, longer this time. When the president spoke again, his voice was softer, almost tender. "You know, John, I want you to promise me something." "What's that, sir?" John asked, curiosity mixing with apprehension. "I want you to make sure you spend every last day feeling proud of who you are and what you've done for this country," the president said firmly. "And I want you to know that no matter where you go, you'll always be remembered. Always." John felt a lump form in his throat. He wasn't sure if it was the words themselves or the sincerity behind them, but something about that moment struck deep into his soul. Then the president added one more thing, a single sentence that would stay with John forever. "John, do you remember the first time you raised the American flag?" At first, John didn't answer. How could he forget? It was etched into his memory like the grooves on an old vinyl record. He remembered standing tall, young and full of hope, as the stars and stripes fluttered in the breeze. He remembered the pride swelling in his chest, the sense of belonging, the knowledge that he was part of something bigger than himself. "Yes, sir," John finally replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I remember." "Well, John," the president continued, his voice cracking ever so slightly, "that flag wouldn't be flying today without men like you. Never forget that." As John listened, tears streamed down his face. He wasn't sure if the president noticed, but he knew one thing for certain: this call wasn't just about gratitude. It was about connection, about reminding someone they mattered, even in their final days. When the call ended, John sat in silence for a long time. The nurse returned moments later, finding him staring out the window, a faint smile playing on his lips. "What did he say?" she asked, gently. John turned to her, his eyes glistening. "He reminded me why I fought," he said simply, "and he made me feel like I still belong." The next morning, the hospital staff noticed something different about John. He seemed lighter, as though a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. His conversations with visitors, family, friends, and even strangers who stopped by to pay their respects took on a new tone. There was laughter now, stories shared with joy instead of sorrow. One afternoon, his grandson Timmy came to visit. The boy, barely 10 years old, sat beside John's bed, fidgeting nervously. "Grandpa," he began hesitantly, "what did the president really say?" John chuckled softly, reaching out to ruffle Timmy's hair. He told me I mattered, he said simply. And he reminded me of the day I raised the flag for the first time. Timmy tilted his head, curious. What was it like? John closed his eyes, lost in the memory. It was early morning, just after sunrise. We were stationed overseas, and we'd spent the night preparing for a mission. But before we left, our commanding officer gathered us together. Today, he said, we're not just soldiers, we're Americans. And then he handed me the flag. Timmy's eyes widened. You got to raise it? I sure did, John replied, smiling faintly. I held that pole steady while the wind caught the fabric. It billowed out, red and white stripes snapping against the blue sky. For a second, everything else faded away. All the fear, all the uncertainty, it didn't matter. Because right there, under that flag, I knew exactly who I was. Timmy nodded solemnly, absorbing the story. You think the president knows what it means to people like you? John opened his eyes, looking directly at his grandson. Oh, I think he does, he said quietly. Maybe not everyone understands it, but some folks carry that same feeling deep inside. They know what it's like to stand tall when the world feels heavy. Days passed, and John grew weaker. Yet, despite his declining health, he remained peaceful. The call from the president had given him something precious, a sense of closure. He no longer worried about being forgotten or overlooked. Instead, he focused on sharing his memories, ensuring they lived on through others. On the last evening of his life, John asked his family to gather around his bedside. With great effort, he reached into the drawer of his nightstand and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was yellowed with age, its edges worn from years of handling. This, he said softly, holding it up, is a letter I wrote to myself the day I shipped out for my first tour. I wanted to remind myself why I chose this path. Now, I want you all to read it. Keep it safe. His daughter took the letter gently, her hands trembling. As she unfolded it, tears streamed down her face. Written in John's youthful handwriting were words of hope, courage, and determination. Words that spoke of dreams and promises kept. After reading the letter aloud, she looked at her father, her voice choked with emotion. Dad, how did you manage to hold on to this for so long? John smiled weakly. Because it mattered, he whispered. Just like the president said. Hours later, as the moon rose high above the small town, John slipped away peacefully. His family surrounded him, holding his hands, whispering their goodbyes. Though his body was gone, his spirit lingered, in the stories he told, the lessons he imparted, and the love he gave. News of John's passing spread quickly, reaching even the White House. Days later, during a public event, President Trump paused mid-speech. Clearing his throat, he looked out at the crowd. I want to share a story with you today, he began. It's about a man named John Harper, a veteran who served our country with honor and distinction. Recently, I had the privilege of speaking with him. He reminded me of something important, that sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can mean the most to those who need them most. The audience fell silent, captivated by the president's words. John taught me a lesson, the president continued. He showed me that true strength isn't measured by power or wealth. It's measured by the impact we leave on others. So let's honor men like John Harper, not just with words, but with actions. Let's make sure every hero feels valued, every day. As the speech concluded, applause erupted throughout the room. But for many in attendance, the real takeaway wasn't the rhetoric. It was the image of a frail veteran, clutching a phone, hearing words that brought tears to his eyes. In the days and weeks that followed, John's story touched countless lives. Strangers shared his tale online, posting videos and articles about the call that changed everything. People began reaching out to veterans in their own communities, offering thanks and support. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of heaven, John Harper smiled. He'd done his part. Now, it was someone else's turn to carry the torch. As John's story continues to inspire people across the nation, it's clear that moments of connection and gratitude can leave a lasting impact. But the question is, what will you do next? Will you reach out to a veteran in your community? and let them know they're appreciated. Maybe write a letter, make a call, or simply share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Every small act of kindness has the power to change lives, just like that one phone call changed John's final days. So tell me, did this story move you? What do you think we can all do to honor those who've served us silently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart and spark action. Together, let's keep these memories alive and ensure no hero ever feels forgotten. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about remembering, it's about making sure everyone knows they matter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.